Right, welcome back guys to the YouTube channel and the next episode. So today's episode, we will do a quick physique update. We are currently 4 weeks out from the photo shoot, so we have got that coming. But the bulk of what we're going to chat about today is actually how I write training plans for clients that come and work with me on a one-to-one basis. What do I consider? What goes into the thought process? What do they look like? What do I ask for the client to provide me with? So we'll go through all of that. So if that is something that you think would be quite useful to you and your own journey, then of course, like, subscribe, hit the little notification button so that you don't miss videos like this. It will only take half a second. So if you feel that this would be good content for you to view, if this would be useful for you to watch, then take that half a second, do me a favor and do those things for me. Right, but let's get into it. As I said, quick physique update. 4 weeks out and things are coming in that little bit tighter. Hit a new low, 75.1 as of this morning, and it is the 4th of June. So we have got 30 days now. We are coming into the end game, which is exciting, but also absolutely terrifying. But let's take a look. Let's see how the physique is shaping up. Let's get this over and done with. It's a little bit chilly. So there we have it, physique update done, and things aren't looking too bad, are they? I mean, I am sitting now around the weight that I was for my first photo shoot, and we've still got 30 days, 21 days, what's 30 minus 23 days? Quick maths. But 23 days because obviously we'll have peak week, which will look different. It won't be a typical week. So we've got effectively 3 weeks in which to get as lean as possible before we do the peak week, before we have a bit of a carb up and we go and do the photo shoot. So things are looking all right. But back to today's episode, talking about how I program for you, or well, guys who come and work with me on a one-to-one basis, right? And the very first thing that I will do, this is the first thing that I will do, is I will get them to fill out a training assessment form. And this is key because this really kind of sets the foundation of me building the training plan for them. And it's a very easy, straightforward form that they'll fill out. It will take them literally a matter of minutes. And the first thing that they are going to tell me on that form is how often can they train? Can they train 3 times a week? Can they train 4 times a week? On the odd occasion, someone might say that they can train 5 days a week. I'll be honest, the bulk of people that I work with train probably, I would say, mostly 4 times a week. And then I've got some clients that train 3 times a week. And as of right now, I only have 2 clients that train 5 days a week. So that gives you an idea, really, that anything more than 4, it's very few and far between in terms of client numbers that actually manage to do that. And the key thing that you've got to consider as a client when you're filling this out is what's realistic? What can I actually do? Because there's no point saying I can train 5 or 6 times a week if realistically you can't because of what life demands on you in other areas. Because all that's going to happen is you'll end up missing sessions. you're gonna feel crap about that, and that's gonna be demotivating, and it's gonna set you up ultimately for failure in terms of training. Whereas if you're realistic and you say, I can train 3 days, I can train 4 days, and you are consistent with that, you will see so much more progress inside the gym. So that's the first thing that we got to decide, the number of sessions that you can actually do consistently week on week. The next thing is the length of the training sessions. And this will vary from person to person. It ultimately depends on how much time you have available to spend in the gym. Some people like to spend 45 minutes. Some people like to spend an hour and a half. I would say on average, my clients spend somewhere in the region of 45 minutes to an hour 20, maybe at a stretch, an hour 30. But it comes down to you being realistic with the time available. You know, if you can only train 45 minutes per session, fantastic. We can utilize that and build a plan that's going to be perfect for you. Then we'll take a look at some of the movements that they feel comfortable in performing. Squats, deadlifts, bench presses, pull-ups. You know, what do they have experience in doing? How competent do they feel at those movements? And then a big thing as well is kit availability. Looking at what is actually in their gym. How much do they have available to them? Is it just barbells and dumbbells? Is it all of the kit that you could possibly imagine in the world, or is it somewhere in between? So that assessment allows me to create an image of what their training plan can look like. So we start to figure out how often can they train? How much time can they give to training? The movements that they actually feel competent and confident in performing, and what kit do they have available to them. Of course, if there's any injuries that we need to be aware of, that we need to work around, or if there's any specific body parts that they want to focus on as well, then that would all come under this training assessment form as well. But this is the very first thing that I'll do with anyone that comes on board as a one-to-one client, is we'll do this training assessment. So once that training assessment form has been completed by the client, I can then start to imagine what a training split might look like. So the very first thing is deciding the split. Now this will come down to whether you're training 3 days a week, 4 days a week, or on a rare occasion, 5 times a week. Really, you don't need to be training any more than that. If you can do 5 training sessions, that's realistic, cool, we'll work with that. If you can do 4 or you can do 3, perfect, we'll work with that, and we'll design a training plan that suits your needs and what you're able to realistically do week to week. Remember, more does not necessarily mean better. We want consistency, that's what we're striving for. So if you're training 3 times a week, then typically what I would tend to go with is a full body split, because then we can cover everything. We can ensure that we're hitting our muscle groups 2 to 3 times per week, which is what we should be aiming to do, right? That is what has been shown in the studies that have been carried out from a hypertrophy perspective to be the most effective. So we want to be trying to hit each muscle group 2 to 3 times a week. So if you're training 3 days a week, a full body split is perfect. Of course, if you want more focus on specific areas, then you can put some more bias towards those areas, but typically a full body split for a 3-day week is perfect. If you're able to train 4 days a week, then of course this opens it up, because you've got an extra training session, and you could go with a push-pull legs full body split, or you can do an upper-lower classic split. Again, still ensuring that you're hitting each muscle group 2 to 3 times per week. If you do happen to be one of the rare people that can train 5 days a week, then again, it just really kind of opens it up in terms of how you can split your training over the course of the week. But typically, as I said, most of my clients are training 3 to 4 times a week. So we would work more so full body splits, or we do upper lower, or push pull legs full. Push things towards your areas that you want to focus on. The big thing is just be realistic with what you can do. That is the main thing, because as I said before, if you are missing training sessions because you just don't have the time to do it, it's going to be ineffective for what you want to achieve here, particularly from a hypertrophy perspective. Right, so now the training assessment has been done. We've made a decision in terms of what split and training frequency for you. Now it's exercise selection. So how do these sessions actually look once we've decided those first two things? And I think what's really key is, we focus on the basics here. I think it's very easy to get caught up in what's popular, caught up in what looks fancy, because you've got influencers on social media doing certain things with certain machines or using certain accessories like bands and whatnot, and making it look like they're into some really kind of kinky stuff. You don't need to do that. I think the thing that gets overlooked the most is the basic stuff. And it's the basic stuff that works really well when done consistently and progressed. So focus on those. And look, ultimately, as long as your training session kind of performs the following movement patterns, a horizontal push, so that's a chest press, a vertical push, a shoulder press, a horizontal pull, which could be a cable row, a vertical pull, a lat pull down, a squat pattern, whether that is a barbell squat or Smith squat, or leg press, and then a hinge movement, where we're working our hamstrings or glutes with some RDLs, for example. If you are including those movement patterns into your training sessions across the week, you are going to have a well-rounded training plan. And then in terms of the number of exercises that you have in each session, this comes back to how long you want to spend in the gym. If you want to spend as little time as possible in the gym because of time restraints elsewhere in your life, then you would program on the lower end of 6 exercises per session. If you can spend a little bit more time, then you can push up to 7 or 8 exercises, maybe incorporate a few supersets in there, but ultimately don't overcomplicate it when it comes to these training sessions. Keep it simple, keep it focused on the basic movements, include those movement patterns over the course of your training sessions, over the course of your weekly sessions. And as I said, you'll have a well-rounded training session. So we now know how often you can train, how long those training sessions can be. We've made a decision on the split that you're going to use, and we've also gone over the exercises that you're going to include in your training session. So now it's a case of sets and reps. How many sets should you be doing per session, per week? How many reps should you be performing as well? So if we look at this from the purposes of hypertrophy, so building muscle, then studies have shown that anywhere between 10 to 20 working sets per muscle group per week is enough to stimulate growth. Now, depending on how experienced you are in terms of lifting, the lower end of that you will typically be maintaining unless you are new to the gym, in which case you're going to be able to take advantage of newbie gains, and working from 10 working sets per muscle group per week will be enough to stimulate growth. More experienced lifters will need to work on the upper end of that range. Spread your sets evenly across the week as well. This is a trap that I see many people fall in, and they end up spamming muscle groups in a one session. If they're doing their chest, they end up doing 4 exercises and they've done 15 working sets, thinking that more is better, this is going to help with growth, and they couldn't be more wrong. Your quality of reps matter, your quality of sets matter. And by the time you get to your 3rd and 4th exercise of that muscle group, you would have accumulated so much fatigue on the basis that you've actually trained hard and pushed yourself hard in that 1st and 2nd exercise, that the sets that you perform on the 3rd and 4th exercise are not going to make the difference that you think they are, because you won't be able to push yourself as much. You're just doing junk volume at that point. So spread your sets evenly across the week so that you can make sure that the quality of your sets and the quality of reps remain high and consistent. If there are particular areas that you do want to focus on, your chest, your glutes, your back, your shoulders, then from a volume perspective, you will look to work on the upper end of that range. Somewhere I'd say 12 to 15 sets across the week for those areas. If you're happy with any areas already, then of course you'd work on the lower end of that, so that you give the priority to the areas that you want to focus on. So the big thing there is don't do a stupid amount of sets, focus on quality, and do more volume on those areas that you do want to focus on. So when it comes to your reps, I know if you look online, you might see things that, if you do a certain rep range of, 3 to 5, that's more strength based. If you do 8 to 12, that's more hypertrophy based. If you do 15 plus, it's endurance based. To be honest, none of that really matters, because it will come down to how hard you are training and how close to failure you are reaching. So whether you are training in a rep range of somewhere around 5 to 10 or 15 plus, both are still going to elicit the growth that we want as long as we are training close to failure. So that's important. So those last 4 reps, those last 3 to 4 reps that you are performing on a set, they should be really hard. They should be really tough. It should be a lot of hard work to get those last 4 reps done. And if you manage that, you know that you're going to be working in a range that is hitting failure or very close to failure, which is going to help stimulate the growth that we want. So whether you are doing low reps or high reps, it doesn't really matter. And to be honest, this is something that you can have a bit of fun with and do what you enjoy. Some people enjoy going low reps and higher weight, and some people prefer going higher reps and lighter weight. The key is always going to come back to the intensity of your set and making sure it's to the level that we need it to be in order to stimulate the growth that we want. So ultimately, have a bit of fun with the reps that you perform in the movement and do what you enjoy. And finally, rest times. Rest times is something that I did use to program for my clients, and I would say rest for 3 minutes in between these sets because this is a heavier compound movement, or rest for 90 seconds because this is an isolation movement. But I'll be honest, I have changed my stance on this. I now believe that you ultimately should rest for as long as that you personally need, because I don't know what your fitness capabilities are. I don't know how well you can recover in between sets. Only you know that. So ultimately here, my advice to clients and to you watching this is rest as much as you need to, in order to be able to give absolutely everything that you possibly can do to that next set. Because remember, intensity is key. That's what we want. That's what's going to help stimulate the growth that we want to see. And if we're not resting enough in between sets and we're still fatigued or somewhat gassed, then we can't perform to our best ability. And therefore that set is going to be somewhat compromised. So, you can still time your rest periods, give yourself a maximum amount of rest time. It's up to you, but I don't program rest times for my clients. I will simply say rest for as long as that you personally need to ensure that your next set is of the highest quality that it possibly can be. So there we have it. That is how I program for my clients. Looking at their training assessment, deciding their split, the exercise selection, the number of sets and the reps that they're performing, and then rest time. So I hope you enjoyed that. And like I said at the beginning of the video, if this is something that has been useful, then like, comment, subscribe to the channel, share with your friends and family, share with your gym buddy, have a go at writing your own program based on this video and let me know how you get on. But I will ultimately see you on the next one.